Okay, so welcome to today's class. I first of all want to find out if I'm audible enough. So can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's beautiful.
yes, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. So let me start right away by sharing my screen. Today we're looking at the normative and the empirical. In our last class, we had discussed definitions. Now today we want to round up all the rest of the things we want to do about language, or the linguistic aspect of logic before we begin to discuss arguments. Today we're looking at what I will call the normative and the empirical. Now, so in this session, we round up our analysis of the difference between values and facts. Now, we were saying that values are about what we should or should not do, and facts are about what is or is not. Now, sometimes we mistake values for facts. In fact, there are factual statements with implicit value judgments. Let's see some examples. Look at the difference between the following two statements. Statement 1, the president has lifted the lockdown. Statement 2, the president has rightly lifted the lockdown. Now you see that the difference between the two sentences is that the second one has the qualification rightly. Now the first is a factual statement. The second is like the first, but with an implicit value judgment represented by the word rightly. So the second is therefore a value judgment. So you need to be careful before you conclude that certain statements are factual statements. Check a statement, a seemingly factual statement, to be sure that there is no word that signifies a value judgment. And then you can say, okay, it's a factual statement. Otherwise, you might be looking at a value judgment and you thought it is a factual statement. So look out for both the explicit and implicit meanings of statements. Without confirming these two kinds of meanings, you could be misled. You could see how important this distinction is to our business of critical thinking. Yeah, good morning. I'm having a class. So I'll call you in a few minutes, an hour or so. Yeah. So you could see how important this distinction is to our business of thinking critically. Now, so that's it about facts and values. We talk about metaphors and proverbs. Now, crucial to logical reasoning is the need to single out expressions that should not be interpreted literally. There are certain expressions we don't interpret literally, as a matter of convention. Two of such kinds of expressions are metaphors and proverbs. We need to know what they are in order to know how to handle them as logicians. Metaphors, sentences that should not be interpreted literally. That's just a simple definition. Metaphors are sentences that should not be interpreted literally. Examples, don't judge a book by its cover. So we normally interpret it as saying, don't evaluate things by just looking at their appearances. It is raining cats and dogs. Normally we interpret it as saying it is raining heavily. We don't interpret it as raining cats and dogs because cats and dogs cannot rain down from the sky. So such sentences, we don't interpret them literally. We call them metaphors. Proverbs, a sentence with a literal meaning as well as a non-literal one. And the non-literal meaning is usually a piece of advice. So a proverb is a sentence that has both a literal meaning and a non-literal one. And the non-literal meaning is usually a piece of advice. So that means a proverb is a multiple purpose speech act. Multiple purpose speech act. Examples, only a fool tests the depth of a river with two of his feet. So we normally interpret it as, or rather we say the advice is don't embark on a venture without proper reflection. You can see that this sentence has a literal meaning, which is meaningful, which is, very, which we'll find reasonable. Actually, you don't test the depth of a river by climbing in with 2 of your feet. So that one is reasonable advice for going into a river. But it also has the sentence also has a non-literal meaning, that you don't do something without, first of all, trying to find out, do some feasibility studies or find out how the situation is. So that's why we say Proverbs have a literal meaning. They also have a non-literal meaning. It takes a whole village to raise a child, which is true. The advice is that the community is responsible for the moral upbringing of a child. So whether it is in the village or in the town or in the urban setting or wherever it is, or even in a company or an organization or in a school, all of them, the communities in all those places are responsible for training a child. So it's not just in a village. So that's why it's a proverb. No one can lick his or her own elbow, which is true. It's difficult to lick your elbow. So the literal meaning is reasonable. And the non-literal advice is that no person is an island. You need the assistance of other people in your life. The intentions behind Proverbs. Proverbs are mostly used to advise people, but Proverbs are not always sincerely used. For instance, the proverb, no one can lick his or her own elbow, can be used to encourage corruption or convince one that it is impossible to fight corruption. So the intentions behind Proverbs are not always good ones. A little exercise, provide one example each of a metaphor and a proverb. So that one you can do it on your own. I don't think it should waste our time. How is a metaphor different from a proverb? So a metaphor is a sentence we don't interpret literally, but a proverb has both a literal meaning and a non-literal meaning. You can interpret a proverb literally. You can also interpret it non-literally, but you don't interpret a metaphor literally. So I think that's a very crucial difference. And then another difference between metaphor and proverb is that proverbs are usually intended as pieces of advice, but metaphors are not normally, the reason for metaphors is not to advise people. Metaphors can play any role. So that's it about metaphors and proverbs. Let's look at some meaning defects in language. In addition to metaphors and proverbs, there are expressions whose meanings are defective. 2 examples of defective meaning in expressions are vagueness and ambiguity. So these are 2 examples of defects in meaning, defective meaning that we want to look at. Vagueness and ambiguity. Vagueness, an expression is vague when its meaning has no boundaries of application. An expression is vague when its meaning is not precise. So combining these 2 descriptions, a vague expression doesn't have a precise meaning. So because it doesn't have a precise meaning, it doesn't have a meaning that has a clear boundary of application. That is, its meaning has no boundaries of application. For example, he will be here any moment from now. He will be here any moment from now. Now, any moment from now is not precise. It is vague. Any moment from now can be from this moment till Jesus Christ comes again. So it is just any time. The meaning of any moment from now has no boundary of application because it is not precise. I'll come to see your parents at the right time. This is still the same problem. At the right time is imprecise. It has no boundary of application. That car is expensive. Yeah, so the word expensive only tells you that the price of something is more than normal. But you still don't know the price. It could be any price at all. What is the price? We don't know. Is it $1 million or is it just 10 cedis or is it $3 trillion? No idea. So that's vague. Ambiguity. So that's for vagueness. You can see why we say certain sentences or words are vague. Now, ambiguity. Now, ambiguity is a different problem. A sentence is ambiguous when it is capable of more than one meaning. More than one meaning. When a sentence is capable of more than one meaning. There are three types of ambiguity. We have lexical ambiguity, referential ambiguity, and syntactic ambiguity. Now, lexical ambiguity. If an ambiguity occurs in a single word, then it is called lexical ambiguity. This type of ambiguity usually occurs in words that have the same spelling but different meanings. These words are called homographs. So a word that has more than one meaning is a homograph. Examples: he lives close to the bank. He lives close to the bank. Now the word bank is a homograph. So you don't just say bank. You have to qualify the bank. Does he live close to a river bank or a bank as a financial institution? Then military head 6 arms. Military head 6 arms. Let's assume that this is the, the headline of a newspaper. Military head 6 arms. Is it the head of a military man or the head of the military as an institution? Is it the arms of a military man or weapons? We have other homographs such as race, chest, light. When you talk about race, is it the kind of race we see in sports? People running or, or whatever kind of race, even a presidential race, people are engaged in a competition to see who will win. Or are you talking about race as a class of people with a particular skin color? So those kinds of words are homographs, words that have more than one meaning. And when they are in a sentence and they are standing alone and you don't qualify them with a precise adjective, then that sentence is ambiguous. They make a sentence ambiguous if you don't qualify them. And that kind of ambiguity is called what? It's called lexical ambiguity. Now let's look at referential ambiguity. This type of ambiguity occurs when a phrase or a word in a particular context could refer to two or more properties of things in a sentence. So referential ambiguity occurs from the use of pronouns and qualifiers. So this referential ambiguity is normally an ambiguity that comes from Proverbs and other sorts referential words. Examples: the boy told his father about the theft case, and he was very upset. Who was upset? Is it the boy or the father? The pronoun he does not specify which of the nouns in the sentence is referred to. Second example: he used the seed to sell the soap to me, but I did not buy it. What did I not buy? Is it the seed or the soap? So here too, the pronoun it fails to specify which noun it's referring to. Syntactic or sentential ambiguity. When a sentence contains two or more possible meanings, and the sentence is ambiguous. So this kind of ambiguity occurs from a whole sentence. Now, syntactic or sentential ambiguity occurs when it is clear what the individual words in the sentence mean, but it is not clear what the whole sentence means. Now, examples. Today we shall be witnessing violence on TV. Is it that discussion of violence will be held on a TV program, or that violence on TV will be the subtopic of discussion? So you see, the ambiguity comes from the sentence itself, not from the individual words. It's the way the sentence has been constructed. The dean will talk about cheating in the seminar room. Is the dean going to talk about cheating that happened in the seminar room, or is cheating the subtopic of the lecture she's going to deliver in the seminar room? Now, the difference between vagueness and ambiguity. A vague term does not indicate a clear boundary of applying the meaning of the term. On the other hand, an ambiguous term gives us ideas of what it means, but suggests more than one accepted meaning, leaving us confused as to which of the meanings particularly is intended. So, in summary, vagueness means no clear meaning. Ambiguity means more than one accepted meaning. The role of vagueness and ambiguity in language. Vagueness and ambiguity can facilitate equivocation and disagreement in language. Now we're going to look at equivocation right now. It is one of the fallacies that are used to deceive people. The role of vagueness and ambiguity can also be found in metaphors and proverbs. You know that metaphors are intentionally vague so that they can permit different interpretations that are not literal, that are not based on the words in the sentence. Now, equivocation. Equivocation occurs when someone shifts unannounced from one meaning of a word to another meaning of the same word in the same passage. This is usually done with the hope of confusing the reader. Now, equivocation is to take advantage of ambiguity, because equivocation means taking advantage of the ambiguous nature of words to persuade or confuse readers. So, an equivocation, you commit an equivocation when you use a word, a homograph, when you use a homograph in multiple ways, in a way that shows multiple meanings. So we shall study equivocation as a form of argument later in chapter 12. Well, let's see some examples right now. Time flies like an arrow and fruit flies like a banana. The first flies is a verb meaning moving in the air. The second flies is a noun indicating fruit insects. But you may not realize it early enough. Now, the first like is used for the purpose of comparison. The second like is used as a verb indicating a preference for something. Okay, another example. I'm celebrating my birthday in a gay manner because I'm gay. The first use of gay means happiness, and the second means the state of being homosexual. So these are equivocations. Strategy for identifying equivocation. First of all, ascertain whether a word has been used more than once. If you want to find out if there's equivocation in a passage, first of all, look for words that appeared more than once. Then you proceed to check if the word or expression has different meanings in the sentence or passage. So if a word that has been used more than once has different meanings in the same passage, then it means that that passage contains equivocation. So first of all, you need to find out if there is more than one word in a passage, and then the second step is to determine whether the word was used with different meanings, or was presented to generate different meanings. The importance of identifying equivocation. Now, note that vagueness, ambiguity, and equivocation are very important in clarifying arguments. So these are meaning defects that make it difficult to make a good argument. If certain expressions are vague or ambiguous in an argument, their meaning needs to be clarified before we can proceed to evaluate the argument. A little exercise. Determine whether each of the following is vague or ambitious. So we have 7 sentences here. Number 1, we should raise tax on the rich. Is it vague or ambiguous? And then number 2, I'll be back later. Vague or ambiguous? So you can see number 1 is vague, because raising tax on the rich, the problem is, who are the rich? How much does someone have before you can say he's rich? So number 1 is big. 2, I'll be back later. So if you want to correct number 1, you should say you should raise tax on people with a certain income. And you have to specify the income in figures. Number 2, I'll be back later. Later is vague. Later has no boundary of application. Just like rich in statement 1. Then statement 3, I'm renting the new apartment. I'm renting the new apartment. The new apartment. There are billions of apartments all over the world. So no one has any idea what a new apartment you're talking about. So that's vague. Statement 4, stolen jewel found by tree. Stolen jewel found by tree. That is ambiguous. It is ambiguous because there are two interpretations, there are two meanings. So is the stolen jewel found beside the tree? Or is it that the tree found a jewel as if the tree is a person? Okay. Then number 5, democracy is free. So that means statement 4 is ambiguous. It has two meanings. Statement 5, democracy is freedom for all. Freedom for all. Freedom for all. Now, all is without any application. Are you talking about all human beings, all animals, or all goats, all birds, all crocodiles, or all entities in the universe, whether you are a human being, an inanimate object, and all? So there's no boundary of application for all. Then 2 vehicles collide, one died. 2 vehicles collide, one died. This is ambiguous. Now 2 vehicles collide, that one is clear, but one died. When you say one died, who died? Is it one of the vehicles that died or one of the peoples in the vehicles? So there are two meanings. The statement has two meanings. Then statement 7, court tries shooting defendants. Court tries shooting defendants. Now that statement has two meanings, two clear meanings. The meanings are clear, but there are two. Now, the court trying to shoot a defendant with a gun, or is the court trying a defendant in a shooting case? So there are two meanings. All right, so that's it about meaning defects, particularly vagueness and ambiguity. And we saw how someone can take advantage of ambiguity to commit equivocation. Senses of law. Now, so we'll round up this class by looking at what law means. Okay, so we need to take a brief look at what law means. Now we need to understand the different ways in which we use the word law. Now there are 7 senses. We have natural law, civil law, cultural norm, customary law, moral law, logical law, mathematical law, divine law. So when someone asks you, what is the definition of law? You have to tell the person that law does not have a definition. It is only when you specify the type of law. If you say natural law, then natural law has a definition. Civil law has a definition. So all these kinds of laws has definition, but law as a single word cannot have a definition because it is too broad a term. There are different kinds of laws. So you can only define them one by one. Definition of law. So there's no single definition of law. It depends on which sense of law in question. So we'll treat the different senses along with their definitions. Natural laws. Natural laws are also called scientific laws. They refer to statements describing the regularity or uniformity in the patterns of events or properties of things in the world. We form these laws based on past experiences. If, for instance, you observe that the sun always rises in the east and sets in the west, that's a natural law or scientific law. So natural laws are scientific laws. They are conclusions we make about how the universe works. Examples of natural law: planets revolve around the sun. The atomic weight of gold is 12. Animals survive on oxygen. Anything that has weight falls to the ground if suspended in the air. And in the previous slide, we had said that if you observe that the sun always rises in the east and sets in the west, that's a natural or scientific law. So these are natural or scientific laws. So they are the kinds of laws that we study and formulate in the sciences. in the natural sciences. Then we have civil or statutory laws. This is the type of law we study in law, that is studied and practiced by lawyers. So whilst natural scientists are studying and formulating natural laws, natural and scientific laws, lawyers and judges are studying and practicing, or practicing civil or statutory laws. These are laws made by man. Civil or statutory laws are laws made by man to regulate human behavior, usually legal instruments accompanied by sanction and backed by force. Examples: commercial law, tax law, criminal law, corporate law, constitutional law, traffic law, human rights law, and so on. They must be obeyed by all citizens, and they are accompanied by prescribed punishment for disobedience. Then we have cultural norms, social conventions, or social rules. Now, cultural norms or social conventions, these are common understandings about how we should do certain things. So they are not really laws. It is better to call them common understandings about how we should do certain things, whether in traditional societies, in the case of cultural norms, or in modern societies, in the case of social conventions, or in any society, group, organization, or institution, in the case of social rules. Disobedience is not normally punishable, but attracts social disapproval. So because these are common understandings, you can't punish anyone for not playing along with them. Examples include how we should dress, how we should speak, how we should receive visitors, how we should worship, how we should eat our food, how we should observe public holidays, how we should attend social functions. So these are norms. They are common understandings, and disobeying them has no punishment, but it can attract social disapproval. So perhaps we can say that the social disapproval is the punishment. Then we have customary law. Customary law is when a norm has become a civil law. When you transform a cultural norm into a civil law, then it becomes statutory and its disobedience becomes punishable. So we have customary courts in rural areas. Examples of cultural norms that could become customary law are the powers of a chief, traditional marriage rights and duties. Then we have moral law. There's no universally accepted definition of moral law, but moral laws are about rules prescribing how we should or should not behave. Usually for a rule of behavior to be regarded as a moral law, such a rule is universally respected. So for something to be a moral law, every society in the world recognizes that it is necessary in order to live as a community. Examples: do not steal, do not kill, do not discriminate, do not take another person's spouse. When you disobey any of these, when you go against any of these principles, you cause problems in the society. People will get angry. People can, there could be, people can fight. People can also, so when you steal, the owner of what you stole will be angry. When you kill, people will be angry. The relatives of those you kill, the person you killed, will try to see that you pay for it. So when you do any of these things, there will be a problem in the community. So because of that, all the communities around the world, there's no community where you are permitted to steal. You just steal, and nobody cares. So such principles, those things that you need to avoid in order to be able to live in the community, and those things are true in every community around the world. Those are what we call moral laws. Logical law. These are rules for reasoning. The most common examples are deductive and inductive reasoning. We also have other laws. We have causal reasoning. We have this law. We have that law. Example of deductive reasoning: all men are mortal. Kofi is a man. Kofi is mortal. So when you look at this example, you see deduction, the process of deduction. When you say all men are mortal, and then you say Kofi is a man, it means that Kofi is mortal. The conclusion Kofi is mortal is just a simple deduction from the two earlier statements, the kind of deduction you do in mathematics. You can't say it is wrong. To say it is wrong is like to say that 2 plus 2 is 4. That's why we call it deductive reasoning, deductive argument. It is not something you can fault at a logical level. Then we have mathematical laws. And as a matter of fact, we are beginning deductive reasoning in our next class. Now, mathematical laws, these are rules for mathematical operations. Examples: never divide by 0. And then all the rules of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, they are all mathematical laws. Then we have divine laws. Divine laws are laws credited with a supernatural source. Now, examples of divine law depends on the religion in question. So we have different religions and each of them have their own divine laws. For example, in Christianity, there are laws about relating with God, praying, forgiving those who offend us, and so on. So those are all divine laws. Okay, so at the end of this session, you should be able to identify factual statements that are implicit value judgments. You should be able to distinguish metaphors from proverbs. You should be able to understand vagueness, ambiguity, and equivocation. You should also be able to understand the various senses of law. Remember to do all your textbook exercises on metaphors, proverbs, vagueness, ambiguity, equivocation, and the senses of law. So please, I hope by now you have bought your textbooks. Those textbooks contain a lot of exercises. It is when you do those exercises that you internalize what you have learned. Otherwise, you might not be prepared for exams. There are certain examination and assessment questions that can be passed by those who have done a lot of exercises. So you need to be aware of that. Now, this is the end of the class. Any questions before we round up, and then I'll allow you to go to your other classes. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Godwin Tete, you can go ahead.
Sir, please, I want to ask. We are saying ambiguity statements do have 2 different meanings, right?
Yes.
So all statements which have 2 different meanings can be regarded as ambiguous statements.
Yes.
And those without any definite meanings can be regarded as various statements.
Yes, those whose meanings are not precise or has no boundary of application.
Okay.
And then,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. Then Mainman. Mainman, go ahead. Yeah, so Mainman, I don't know if you have a problem with your internet. Letitia, do you want to say something? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, please, if you do that exercise on our textbook, please, who will mark it?
It's just for your private training.
Yeah, maybe you have done it, but how will you know the answers are correct or not?
Check. Every textbook have answers. Check the textbook. The answer should be at the end of the textbook. I know that the textbook in the bookshop, there's one textbook in the bookshop, is red in color, red and black, critical thinking. But that one is big and it's more expensive by 10 cedis, although it contains logic, critical thinking that you study for about 3 or 4 years. That one has exercises in every chapter and it has the answers. So you check the one you're supposed to buy, the one colored blue, which is in the department. I've not checked it very well, but I'm hoping it has answers. If it doesn't have answers, then you can tell your friends to, you can do those exercises in a group and mark them yourselves.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, otherwise you go for a textbook that has answers and then you just look at the answers, and the one in the bookshop, the answers are at the end of the book, but the exercises are at the end of each chapter. So when you finish exercises at the end of each chapter, then you check the answers at the end of the book. And I think each chapter has up to 100 exercises.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. So any other questions? It's a very simple topic, so that's why there are not much questions. You just watch the video again. I'm posting the video right now, and then I wish you the best today.
Sir, please, are you posting it on Sakai or?
Yes, I'm posting it on Sakai, so you can check it after this class.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome in a few minutes. And so, all right, so I wish you a very nice day. And the class is ending. All right.